Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your wiretaps for Monday, October 26th, 2020. I'm joined by Alex Brown. Alex, how are things this week?
Very good. Thank you, Graham.
Cool. So what I was hoping we could do is kick things off this week with a rundown of what's been going on in terms of interview invitations for round one candidates and, just what are the kind of things to look forward to this coming week, because I know we have some schools that have yet to release interviews, right? So give us the lowdown on what's been happening.
Yeah, right now we're seeing a lot of interview invites going out from schools that offer invites on a rolling basis. So that's very good. This upcoming week, we are scheduled to hear from Wharton. They will release their interview invites. And if Sloan hasn't already done so, because we're recording this on Thursday, so I'm not sure what's going to have happened later on Thursday and on Friday. If Sloan hasn't already done so, they will be releasing their interview invites this upcoming week too, because they have stated, and I forget where they stated it, but they will release their interview invites by the end of October. So yeah, lots of activity going on, Graham, but there is a really interesting conversation going on right now on ApplyWire, of which you've been quite heavily engaged. So I thought I'd just ask you the same questions you directly on this podcast, Graham. Are there going to be less seats available to international students this season at the top tier MBA programs?
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation happening, and I think you must have been the one that pinned that conversation to the top of the ApplyWire page so that people can more easily engage with it. Yeah. But basically, someone was posting saying, "Wow, a lot of great candidates are getting rejected, without interviews at top schools in round one," and they talked about specifically Indian males. And whether, this is just a tough year, or is it even worse because of deferrals, because of COVID? And so, yeah, it's a really good question. I guess you could look at it and say, let's take Harvard. Harvard allowed anyone to defer who wanted. So their class is 200 students light this season. And so what that means is they deferred those 200 students into either this coming year or the next. That was the flexibility that HBS wanted to reserve for themselves. So they have people already admitted, arguably, to this next class, right? About 100 of them, I'd guess, right? So that means that there are arguably fewer slots. And the question then becomes, who are those people? And do they weight more heavily international? Or maybe, or is it evenly spread? And my guess is that on the surface, I'd have to imagine that, if you were in America, got into HBS and, we're trying to decide whether to go, it was probably easier on the margin for you to figure out a way to get to Boston and join the program versus, say, if you were overseas, maybe even in India and trying to get a visa and just the idea of traveling during the pandemic might have been challenging for some. So it's possible that, that there are fewer slots. Keep in mind, the schools, it's not like the schools sit down at the beginning of the admission season and say, we want, 8% Indian males in our class this year, or, 3% Chinese female. They don't do that, right? But they do have a ballpark of they want to have, a lot of diversity in the class, and they sort of keep tabs on this. They don't want to have the entire class all be from the same country or something. So on the margin, I think some of this stuff might be happening. I also think it's just going to be a competitive year, right? There are a lot of people applying to business school. That's what we've been hearing so far in round one. So yeah, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on this, Alex, but it's a good question, and there's been a lot of lively discussion about it.
Yeah, it is a very good question. I'm enjoying reading the commentary from various folks in terms of how they're weighing in. I think your point's absolutely valid in terms of who needed to defer more last season is likely to have been the international student over the domestic student, which would then disproportionately place them already in the pipeline for this season. So it's a very interesting question. And yeah, we'll see. Obviously we'll never absolutely know what the outcomes of that is going to be. What I will also say is, each season, we do have these overrepresented populations that it's extremely tough for folks in those groups to gain admission, and they have to make sure they absolutely dot their I's, cross their T's, and get everything lined up perfectly. So sometimes when you're making calls just based on some data points that we see on LiveWire, there's a lot more to the application that may have influenced that decision for sure.
Yeah, and that's actually a good segue, because one of the candidates we're going to talk about today has already applied in the first round and has some feedback. And so there's a lot that goes into this. But yeah, just love to see these kinds of conversations happening. In other news, we've run a couple of additional Real Humans pieces. We've got one for Keenan Flagler at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where we profiled, I think, 5 or 6 current MBA students there. That was a fun piece. And then we also did USC Marshall out in California. So those will just keep coming, as I've mentioned in the last few weeks. But those are fun to read, especially if you're looking at any of these schools. It gives you a great sort of lens to view the program, via some of the current students, right? So the other thing is, I did want to mention, Alex, we got another review for the podcast. So
nice.
I think my complaining has generated some reviews. This one came from someone who calls them, for some reason they titled the review The Alpha. I'm not sure what that means, but maybe that means like we're the best or something. I'm not sure, or if it's just,
yes.
I guess so. So anyway, they wrote, having recently begun my MBA journey, this podcast has taught me everything I need to know in the early stages of my application process. I am confident that I'll be tuning in every Monday until my acceptance. And then they go on, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just wanted to thank them for submitting that review. It's always, again, it just helps Alex and I to see this feedback. And they did mention that they enjoyed a recent episode that I had recorded with some folks from Duke University. That was kind of a change of pace. We did a whole thing about tech and entrepreneurship and how the MBA is kind of adjusted to accommodate those students who have interests in that domain, and like how the curriculum has really been shifted. So that was fun. But yeah, so please keep the reviews and ratings coming. Alex, we've got 3 great profiles to go through today, and they're all pretty different this week. And we've got, last week there was a theme around my kind of low numbers. This is a bit of a mixed bag, and I think it's going to be interesting to talk through these candidates. Before we get to that, I did want to mention that we're bringing back the essay workshops. Some of you who listen regularly know that in September, we sat down with admissions directors from Wharton and Chicago and Columbia and a whole bunch of other top schools, and we peppered them with questions about their essay topics, like how did they come up with the topics, what do they look for, etc. And those events were, sort of standing room only. They were virtual events, but we had a ton of people join us for that. And so because of that, we're doing them again in November. And so they'll be on November 11th and November 18th. We typically have 4 schools for each session. It's all still somewhat in flux, but I believe as of now, we've got Berkeley, which is the Haas School of Business. We've got INSEAD, Cornell Johnson, UNC Keenan Flagler, Michigan's Ross School is on board, and I think UT Austin and Georgetown. So we've got a whole bunch of interesting schools, and I think there's still at least 1 or maybe 2 more that are going to come in the door for this. So stay tuned. You can sign up. You have to register for these things in advance, and you can do so on the website. And they're a lot of fun. I loved the last round. It's always fun to ask these admissions officers how on earth they come up with these questions and what they're looking for. And I think these are really instructive and useful. So as opposed to just sitting down and hearing schools do the usual, like, our program's great kind of stuff, this is much more practical, I think, in terms of what candidates are looking for as they sit down to start producing those round 2 applications. So Alex, anything else from you before we kind of dive in this week?
No, let's kick on. I'm actually quite excited about those essay workshops. I think I might be participating. I reckon I should host the one with Ross and with Georgetown, since I know both of those admissions directors at some level. Right. So yes, very exciting. Well done. Yeah. Yeah,
no, that'll be fun, and it'll be cool to have you to participate as well. So let's move on. We've got, let's start with Wiretaps candidate number 1. So this person is hoping to start next fall, and they have 5 schools on their list. They are Berkeley, Duke, Stanford, Wharton, and Yale. This person's been working in EdTech and is hoping to do something entrepreneurial after business school. I can say this is a woman because she does indicate that in her notes. Her GRE score was a 325 and her GPA a 3.58 from a top 10 U.S. undergrad. She was a humanities major and she currently has 2 years of work experience, and feels like she has a solid kind of story to tell and some strong recommendations, but no quant in undergrad. So she took MBA math, and she also, has a decent score on the GRE. What do you think of this candidate? Because it's, on the one hand, she's got kind of interesting background with the EdTech stuff. I believe that her future goals, maybe you can help shed some light, but I think her future goals do kind of involve, staying in that space, which is a really interesting space, as you and I can attest. We love EdTech. But yeah, what's your take on this candidate?
Yeah, this candidate, in my mind, should only apply to the very top schools, and if she's not successful, then reapply next season. I think this is a classic example of someone with a tremendous amount of upside, lots of potential, is now the right time. And one way to overcome the is now the right time is, well, maybe I'll apply to some safety schools too, lower my sights a little bit so I can guarantee to get a spot this season. I don't think she should do that. I think she should stick to her guns, apply to some of the elite programs, and knuckle down and stay at work if she's not successful, and continue on what seems like a fascinating path of life, generally, and reapply. I think one of the top schools will likely want to take her anyway. There's lots to like here. EdTech is obviously fast-moving space right now. We're all trying to figure out how to do online education and so on and so forth. I mean, you've got to imagine that industry's going nuts right now in terms of new entrepreneurial ideas and various other things. I mean, we all love Zoom. Zoom's become a verb, and it's all brilliant, but I think there's a lot of development in that space. So she's hanging her hat on that development. That's very good. She's also does a lot of interesting stuff. She had a popular YouTube channel for years. She's written a sci-fi book. It's unpublished though, Graham. I'm like, why isn't she self-publishing? That's what we do these days. So get it out there. Take the risk. See if you can build a market around your self-published book. That's something that I've, in one of my sort of tangential careers had to go at. Yeah. And it's a huge entrepreneurial marketing exercise. So I would encourage you to do that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of upside here, Graham, quite frankly, and she should not compromise and so forth. So that's my quick top-level assessment.
Yeah, and I think it's what makes her interesting is not only the fact that she's working in EdTech, but that her goals kind of reside in that area. And as you point out, it's a hot area. I mean, I think what we've been doing with data and things at ClearAdmit is kind of fun EdTech stuff too. And so we love this space, obviously, right? But it's just it's a sector that you don't see a ton of applicants coming from, at least not historically. And I think I'm feeling pretty comfortable with her numbers and her lack of quant background because of the fact that she did MBA math, and because her GRE is solid, GPA is decent, she went to a good school. So I think
she's smart, Graham. Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. She might not have done the undergrad that's most aligned with the MBA, but I don't think there's any doubt that she's smart.
Right. And I think, she also mentioned in the notes that she's biracial and queer. So that she has just a number of angles to her candidacy that are going to make her interesting. And I think I did note to her that she should connect with relevant student clubs and just get to know people at these schools. That'll always help. So I like this candidate, and I totally agree that she should go for the best schools, which is kind of what her list is right now. Yeah. And if it doesn't work out, work for the additional year and circle back. But I feel like she's got a really good chance. And as you said,
I mean, there's no doubt in my mind she'll be a stronger candidate next season, I think.
Sure.
The question is, does a school want her as a stronger candidate and run the risk that she goes somewhere else? Or will the schools take that little bit of a gamble and get her into their fold? And I think more and more schools are sort of in the latter camp. Whereas when I was in AdCom, which is now several years ago, we might have said, you know what, she's going to be a better student next season. Let's make her wait. And frankly, we would have probably lost her to HBS or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that she does she mentioned in her comments when we were going back and forth that she likes the podcast. She said, "Thanks for producing the Clear Admit podcast. I've been listening for months and really love it. It in part inspired me to start my own podcast. So thanks for what you add to the world." So I thought that was cool that we helped her to. I guess she probably listened to us and was like, "If these two monkeys can do it, anybody can." Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
I was thinking exactly the same thing.
So
it's like, yeah, if those guys can get away with it, why can't I?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
No, that's good.
Yeah. So let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 2. So this person's got 7 schools in their sites. They've got Tuck, Harvard, Michigan, MIT, Kellogg, Chicago, and Wharton. They don't want to start until the fall of 2022. So they've got a little more than a year until they'd really be, well, about a year from now, they'd be in the thick of the application process, presumably. They've been in the military, working in the kind of explosive ordnance disposal branch. Which I guess is, kind of getting rid of bombs that could go off. And then they want to get into consulting or tech. And so they have companies like Bain, BCG, McKinsey, Google, Microsoft, Tesla on the target list. GRE score 321. GPA is 3.5. This person has 7 years of work experience and is located in Tennessee in the U.S. and is hoping to land in Boston. And they indicate, they want to pivot from military to management consulting, ideally at MBB, or maybe a product manager role at a large tech company. And I think the interesting thing here is, that this person's not applying right away. They've got another year until they're going to apply. And I believe that also is right around the timing that their service their time in the service will end, if I understood correctly from the notes. So we had a lot of back and forth, and I might be not remembering that right. But what do you make of this candidate? I mean, there's a lot of things to like, but then there's, this sort of GRE score is a little bit lower than what we see as the average of the schools on their list. So what do you make of this?
Yeah, a few things. I just giggling to myself, actually, that part of this person's interest is in tech. I hope it's not in bomb making. But yeah, so this person's part of the bomb squad, as they put it in their notes. Fascinating experience. And as you said in one of your comments, a mistake at work for most normal people might be losing a client. A mistake at work for this guy might be a little bit more serious. So yeah, no, some super interesting stuff. There's a couple of things I wanted to pick up on, and then I'll let you take it from there, Graham. One is he asked about getting involved in extracurriculars now, which he hasn't done much lately. And if he starts now, will it look sort of fake in terms of, the AdCom's looking at it? Oh, he only started a year ago, and this, that, and the other. Is he only doing it for the application? And my answer to that is very sort of straightforward. If it's something that you really want to do, you're passionate about it, and you get involved in something about which you're passionate, then you'll make it work, and you'll commit time, effort, and energy to it. So I would absolutely tell this person to get involved now, and don't worry about how you think AdCom will view it. The more important thing is you want to get involved, so get involved. I don't think there's really a scenario where it's going to harm your application. So the value you get out of doing the volunteer work, and he wants to do it with his fiance and so on and so forth, I think absolutely fantastic. So get on and do that. The bigger issue here is the GRE score. So it's a 321, which, as we know, is within range of top schools, but it's on the lower end of the range. And this person has another year before they're applying. And we've had some back and forth on ApplyWire on this particular issue. Should they retake the GRE again? So they moved it up from, I think, 316 to 321. And they're a little reluctant because when they did all their practice tests, actually 321 came out above what they were scoring in their practice tests. So they really don't think there's much more to be gained from from taking the test again. But Graham, you were pretty frank in your responses, I think, to this particular issue. Should this person be targeting maybe a 323, 324 on the GRE, and they've got a year to do that? Do you think that's a worthwhile endeavor in this case?
Yeah, this is a tough call, right? Because I think this person, they've been to Afghanistan, Africa, they've been working with communities to help them figure out, how to deal with this ordinance that's laying around in war-torn countries, after a conflict and stuff. And it's just amazing work, and there's just so much to like. And then you see the GRE and you're kind of like, oh, it's below average, just, particularly for those schools they're targeting. And then you hear they're not going to apply for another year. And so my thought was, get like a tutor, like spend all the time you can to boost that score, because suddenly some additional doors may open. But I recognize, they've taken it twice. They maybe are worried about that and feel like they've already kind of hit the mark. And so, it could go either way. I obviously, if they felt like there was any chance that they could boost the score, I would spend a ton of time and do it. As to the extracurriculars, like you said, I think you shouldn't worry about whether the committee is going to think it looks bad. We're still a year out before they're even applying. They're in the military, which, a lot of times folks in the military have less time to do some of these outside activities, or even just less access, especially if they're, out, in the theater, right, or whatever you call it, in the, wherever there's a conflict happening, right? So I'm not as worried about that. But I do like this. I like this candidate. I could just tell by the way that, the kind of descriptions offered up about the work experience. This person has a lot to offer, a lot of interesting experience. They did kind of poke at me a little bit because you have more likes than me, I noticed on ApplyWire.
Yes. You've been posting a bit lately, and I've been liking your posts, so I've been giving you a bit of an edge there, Graham.
That's very nice of you. Yeah. So, but in any event, no, I think this is an interesting quandary. It's sort of like you have a year until you're going to apply. Do you go all in and just figure out the test, or maybe in some cases, it's rare to see someone move to the GMAT from the GRE because the GMAT is perceived as being a little bit more difficult. But I don't know what this candidate needs, but it would be potentially useful to have a better score. I don't think they need to do anything else. Like, I really think the rest of the file looks pretty great.
Right.
So yeah, I do wish this person all the best of luck. And yeah, I think it's up to them to decide whether they think they can eke out some additional points or not.
So it's a binary choice, right? Or let's imagine it's a binary choice for the sakes of this conversation. Should this person go all in to improve the GRE score, or should this person go all in to get more involved in the volunteer aspect? And before you answer the question, also recognize that this person wants to volunteer and get involved in their community. So there's other value in making that second decision other than flat out getting into a top business school. Which of the two choices would you recommend they take?
Yeah, it's a tough call, because I would say, well, if this person's, Wharton or Harvard material, they should be able to do it all, right? But if they had to pick one, that's a really good question, Alex. I think, boy,
you're sounding like a politician now, Graham. Just go down on one or the other.
Boy, frankly, I'd rather they have a 325 and explain, the extracurriculars away because they've been active in the military. If I'm just looking at the numbers here, that's, obviously, yeah.
And as you said, military folk don't generally have to explain extracurricular stuff, because we recognize that they are, like, a military career is more life consuming rather than the 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 job, and then you have other stuff. When you're in the military, you're in the military. I think AdCom generally understand that. And I wrap up this conversation by saying, Graham, this is a really super character, I think, and absolutely I see them in admitted to at least one of the target schools they've listed, between sort of Tuck to Harvard, and it might well be Harvard, and it might well be with the credentials they currently have. What we're talking about is how to sort of potentially further strengthen to increase the odds that it is Harvard or Wharton, or whichever is their number one selection out of the 7 that they've selected. But this is someone, I want to go have a beer with this guy. frankly, I want to know what mushroom hunting is, but that's a whole nother story. But this is a sort of person you want in your classroom, I think.
Yeah. I mean, with that said, Alex, I feel like you'd want to have a beer with kind of anybody that we've ever talked about.
Yeah, pretty much.
But no, in fairness, like I do think, this is an interesting candidate. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, I'm sure that this person knows, but we have nice friends over at Service to School, which is like a nonprofit that works with veterans who are applying to business school. So if for some reason the person who posted doesn't know about those guys, they should look them up, because they offer basically free counseling to people who are going to be applying to business school, and they match you up with someone who's already gotten into a top school, and it's a really great service. So Service to School, they can just Google it. The last candidate, let's talk about Wiretaps candidate number 3 here. So this person's applying to 5 schools, which include Dartmouth, MIT, Chicago, Wharton, and Yale. They want to start next fall, so they're actually in the thick of applying, and we'll get to that in a second, because they've even dropped some of these applications in the early round and have some feedback. They've been working as a hedge fund analyst, also did some work at a startup right out of school, want to move into investment banking, and they've got Bank of America, Goldman, JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley all on the list. The GMAT score is a 760, nice big score there, 3.4 GPA, 4.5 years of work experience, and they're in the Northeast and they want to stay, presumably in the Northeast, I think New York. They indicate a post-MBA location of, quote, investment banking, which might be a glitch in the system, or it could just mean they just want to work wherever there might be an investment banking job. They were an econ, Chinese, and poli-sci triple major at a state school, did study abroad. That's kind of the rough profile. There are a couple more details that they provided, but the main thing I wanted to share with you, Alex, is that they were rejected from Columbia as an early decision candidate, and they also were rejected at Harvard Business School. They didn't get an interview, and they're waiting on news from MIT and Wharton. They indicate that those other schools on the list, like Tuck and Booth and Yale, they're going to apply to in the second round. But I'm curious, we had some back and forth, but I'm curious, what do you make of this candidate? Because in light of the feedback that they've already had, are you concerned? Are you kind of just thinking this is a fluke? What's your view?
Yeah, it's not a fluke. If you don't get an interview invite at Harvard, obviously that's a tough pill to swallow, but they take a deep cut in terms of who they invite to interview, maybe 25% of the applicant pool, or maybe even deeper than that. So unlike other schools that might offer interview invites to 50%, they're definitely more rigorous in that sort of pre-interview phase of the application review process. So you'll see a lot of folk that ultimately didn't get an interview at Harvard sitting in another great M7 program in the following fall. There's absolutely no doubt about that. What's a little bit more troubling is not getting an interview at Columbia early decision. Some of that could be down to app execution. One of the things you've got to make sure you do very well when you apply to Columbia is make sure that Columbia really believes that you think Columbia is a great option for you, and being in New York City for your MBA is pretty critical for your success. So, making sure you hit those markers, applying to Columbia early decision is super important. We don't know if this was related to app execution. I got to think that the career to date looks pretty good, Graham. You might know a little bit more about that than me, but it looks pretty good. Obviously, the GMAT's ridiculously high. GPA is okay, and so on and so forth. Slightly below average, but certainly that GMAT sort of really stands out a little bit, I think. So they're going to be applying in round 2. They got to wait to hear from Wharton and Sloan, and we know that those interview invites are coming out. Either they might have come out on Friday or for Sloan, but certainly this upcoming week it's Wharton. They might well get an interview invite to at least one of those programs, and then all of a sudden the picture looks very different. But let's take the worst case scenario. They don't get invites at those schools. They've got to go into round 2. Well, they have to go into, or really be thinking about round 2 anyway, because interview invite isn't the final decision. They won't get their final decisions till December. So by that point, they should have at least already developed their approach to round 2, even if they don't actually have to have pulled the trigger. They've listed that they're going to be applying to Chicago and Yale for round 2. I mean, Chicago does sound like a good fit to me with this sort of profile. So actually, as does Sloan. So we'll see what Sloan says. Yale, I would also recommend, if they really figure that they have to go to school this season, that they should be looking at Stern, right, in New York, obviously with an iBanking focus, as well as I think Cornell does very well with this type of candidate. One thing we don't know about this candidate, Graham, is what are their interests outside of work? And one of the potential fears here is this is a very strong candidate, but quite unidimensional. So making sure that you show your full profile in the applications. We just don't know that, I don't think, Graham, do we?
Well, so since we kind of pulled this to feature on the episode, they shared a little bit more information. So they indicate that they co-founded a green startup incubator while they were an undergrad.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then they also said that they currently mentor local at-risk youth in their community. They've done the CFA level 1, although that's more of a worky kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like they have some stuff. I guess one of the things that occurred to me is that their work experience, while interesting in terms of a startup and then moving on to a hedge fund, it sounds like it's a smaller hedge fund and it's likely not a startup that everyone's heard of. I mean, they didn't offer detail, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess that these are kind of, what's the best way to put it? I would say they're kind of like off-brand work experience. Like it's not, they're not at McKinsey, they're not at one of the main hedge funds that everyone knows or something, right? So there could be some of that in play. Although, frankly, it sounds like they've done well. They've been promoted at their current job, and again, that GMAT score is fantastic. So I gotta come down on the side of this being execution oriented. I mean, I think anything is possible, right? As you said, a lot of great people get cut in the very early phase with HBS because HBS interviews such a small slice and then accepts a high percentage of those that they interview. But the CBS rejection, and I don't know if they indicated or not, maybe they had an interview. They just said rejected from CBS. So it's actually unclear, right? So maybe they did make the interview round, but if they didn't, I would be very concerned because I mean, again, you made some really good points. It's totally possible that they didn't convince the CBS admissions team that they really wanted to go to Columbia, and it's totally possible that they're a great candidate, but not great enough to get into HBS's interview phase, right? So that's possible, but just, I don't know, I don't know, just part of me wants to really be certain, and I would have them take a long, hard look at their file, make sure that everything's positioned right, because just something's not adding up for me. And hopefully this will all be moot. They'll get interview invites this week from Sloan and Wharton or something, and they'll sail off into the sunset. But if not, I think, you're right. They've got to start thinking about what's the strategy for round 2 and how can they put it all together. And I think the schools you mentioned are perfect, whether it's Stern, Cornell, Booth. They have Dartmouth and Yale on the list as well. All these schools are great. Yeah. Could absolutely help them, reach their goals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's a couple of things that are not in doubt. Is this person capable of handling the rigor of the experience at a very top school? Absolutely. The question is just making sure that the app execution really presents the best sort of profile of who this person is. But I wish them the absolute best of luck.
Yeah, and they closed their comments to us on the site with a note that they would love to be featured on the podcast or get more comments. So hopefully this has helped them to better understand our point of view on their candidacy. Alex, we've done it again, and our listeners as well have now, spent 30 plus minutes with us when they should have been writing their essays or prepping for interviews. Or doing anything.
All 3 of them, right, Graham?
Yeah.
Very
but
good.
In any event, thanks for picking these out. We'll be back next week with another episode of Wiretaps. And Alex, just look forward to seeing you next week. We'll have a lot of news next week with these big schools coming up with interview invites. So looking forward to it. Yeah.
And best of luck, everyone. And please stay safe. We're experiencing a second wave here in the UK, and I imagine in other parts of the world. Well, I know in other parts of the world you're dealing with a lot of the same stuff. Everyone stay safe, best of luck, and we'll look forward to being back with you again next week.
Sounds good. All right, see you in a week.
Cheers.